All right, so are you ready to like really dive deep into Macondo?
Let's do it.
Because today we're looking at Netflix's adaptation of 100 Years of Solitude.
Oh, big one.
Yeah, this is a big one. And we've got two reviews that I think take us beyond just like the initial hype.
Yeah.
One is really captivated by the visuals, but kind of wrestling with the book's heavier themes.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is praising how faithful it is to the story, but pointing out maybe some pacing concerns.
It's interesting because 100 Years of Solitude is such a landmark book, right?
Yeah,
It's not just a story. It's like a cornerstone of magical realism,
Yeah.
and a Nobel Prize winner to boot.
Exactly.
So trying to translate, generations of this family, a town steeped in magic, and this legacy that kind of looms over everything
Yeah,
onto the screen, it's got to be tough.
yeah, for sure.
It's like walking a tightrope between staying true to the book and making something that actually works visually.
Yeah, and speaking of visually, both of these reviews highlight how Netflix did not hold back.
Yeah, they went all out.
Yeah. Yeah, they called the production decadent,
I love that.
like elaborate costume special effects that bring Macondo to life in a way that even someone who loves this book
Mm-hmm.
never quite pictured.
Wow.
Like we're talking earth-shaking organisms, ghosts, just like part of everyday life. A plague of insomnia that feels way too real.
It makes you wonder, though, how those visuals actually tie into, the deeper themes of the story.
Oh, yeah.
The reviewer from Roger Ebert actually mentioned that, the Macondo they saw on screen was even more visually compelling than what they imagined when they were reading it.
Interesting.
And I thought that was fascinating. Like, for example, those earth-shaking organisms,
Uh-huh.
they're not just there for spectacle. They actually represent the Buendia family's impact on Macondo.
Oh, I see.
Like how their actions literally shake the town to its core.
That's such a good point. It's
Yeah.
not just about recreating the fantastical, it's about using it to underline the deeper meaning.
Exactly.
But then we get to the adaptation being super faithful to the book,
Right.
which is where things get kind of complicated.
Okay.
One reviewer points out that while this might please diehard fans,
Mm-hmm.
it also means bringing some of the more problematic aspects of the book to the screen, like unfiltered.
It really raises the question about choices in adaptation.
Yeah.
Like if we look at Colonel Aureliano Buendia and Remedios Moscote as an example,
Okay.
the book frames their relationship as romantic, even though he chooses her when she's still a child.
Right.
And the adaptation doesn't shy away from depicting this.
Yeah.
And the reviewer was critical of that.
Yeah.
They said it doesn't engage with how we understand those power dynamics now versus when the book was written back in 1967.
It does feel like a missed opportunity.
Yeah,
Like the series could have used this to offer a more contemporary perspective.
definitely.
I mean, other adaptations have done this really well, like Wicked,
Oh, yeah.
which reinterprets The Wizard of Oz.
Right.
Shows you can engage with the darkness, but also add layers of critique.
Wicked is a good example.
Yeah.
It doesn't shy away from the darker stuff in the Wizard of Oz story,
Uh-huh.
but it frames it in a new light, gives depth to characters that were pretty one-dimensional before.
Exactly.
Explores the complexities of good.
Exactly. And it's not just the Aureliano and Remedios storyline either.
Right.
You've got Arcadio's attempted assault, and then his subsequent relationship with Santa Sofia,
Yeah.
which the book portrays with a disturbing lack of agency on her part.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Pilar and her relationships with the Buendia boys when they're young.
Oh, yeah.
Again, framed as romantic, even though there's clearly this power imbalance.
Yeah.
The reviewer was really struggling with this,
Yeah, I can see that.
praising the production,
Bro.
but being deeply troubled by these elements.
I think it speaks to the larger conversation about Gabriel Garcia Marquez himself.
Right.
Like, he's a literary giant, no doubt,
Mm-hmm.
but his work also reflects some of the troubling social norms of his time.
Yeah.
So how do we reconcile that? Can we appreciate the artistry while acknowledging the flaws?
Yeah.
And the adaptation, unfortunately, doesn't seem interested in, digging into those questions.
It does make you wonder if they could have achieved the same visual grandeur,
Yeah.
but also use those visuals to nudge the narrative forward a bit,
Mm-hmm.
maybe make a statement.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine how powerful it would have been to visually represent Santa Sofia's lack of agency
Wow, yeah.
in her relationship with Arcadio,
Hmm.
or to use the magical realism to show the impact of these power imbalances on the characters.
I think that would have been incredible. It would have
Yeah.
added a whole new dimension to the adaptation,
Right.
allowed it to resonate with viewers on a much deeper level.
Yeah.
It could have been a commentary on how societal norms have evolved,
Mm-hmm.
but also how these themes are still so relevant today.
The other review we're looking at focuses more on the storytelling itself,
Okay.
praising the adaptation for capturing the book's magical realism,
Mm.
which is not an easy thing to do.
No, it's
No.
not.
But they also mention that the pacing suffers at times.
Interesting.
It seems like sticking so closely to the book might have made the story drag in places.
Yeah, adapting a dense, sprawling work like this is always a balancing act.
Right.
Staying true to the source material is important,
Uh-huh.
but you also have to make it work as a visual medium.
Yeah.
And that sometimes means streamlining things or rearranging certain elements to keep the audience engaged.
It's interesting because they also highlight how some of the acting elevates the material.
Oh, really?
Both reviewers mention Claudio Cattaneo as Colonel Aureliano Buendia,
Okay.
and both Nicole Montenegro and Akima, who play Rebecca at different ages, as standouts.
Interesting.
They say they bring this much-needed naturalism to these fantastical situations.
Finding the right cast is crucial, especially in a story that spans generations.
Absolutely.
It sounds like they managed to find actors who can really embody the essence of these complex characters,
Yeah.
even if the adaptation itself doesn't always delve into their complexities as deeply as it could.
One criticism both reviewers touch on is that some characters, specifically Jose Arcadio Buendia and his wife Ursula, feel more like archetypes than fully fleshed out individuals. Do you think that's a deliberate choice reflecting the book's use of symbolism, or is it a side effect of condensing such a massive story?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a bit of both.
Okay.
Garcia Marquez often uses his characters to represent like broader ideas or historical forces,
Mm-hmm.
but the limitations of adaptation probably play a role too.
Yeah.
You know, when you're trying to fit a century of events into a limited series,
Mm-hmm.
some character development is going to fall by the wayside.
Right.
It's interesting to think about how that impacts the viewer, though.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, think about how you felt watching Ursula, for example.
Okay.
Did her symbolic role as the family matriarch kind of detract from her emotional impact?
Mm.
This is a key tension I think the adaptation is navigating,
Yeah.
balancing those grand symbolic figures with the need to create characters that resonate on a personal level.
It's a reminder that adapting a book is all about making choices,
It is.
about deciding what to emphasize and what to leave behind.
Yeah.
And sometimes those choices lead to both triumphs and compromises.
Exactly.
And that's what makes this deep dive so interesting.
It is.
We're not just looking at a visual adaptation of a story.
Mm-hmm.
We're examining how those choices shape our understanding of the book itself
Right.
and its place in our world today.
It's a whole other layer
It is a whole other layer.
to the whole experience.
Definitely.
Makes you wonder if they'd taken more liberties visually, if it would have landed differently.
Oh, how so?
Like, what if the magical elements weren't just pretty?
Uh-huh.
What if they reflected what was going on inside the characters?
Okay, yeah.
Like, you know, showing how much those expectations weigh on them.
Oh, wow. Yeah, using the magical realism as like a visual metaphor
Exactly.
for what they can't express or escape. That's cool.
Right. Instead, they just recreated the book,
Mm-hmm.
which the reviewers say doesn't always work on screen.
All right, they mentioned the pacing. Like, it gets bogged down sometimes.
Uh-huh.
I wonder if that's tied to how some characters feel like archetypes.
Oh, interesting.
Like, if we don't connect with them emotionally,
Right.
maybe the slower parts drag even more.
That's a good point. The Roger Ebert reviewer specifically said they were disappointed. The adaptation didn't give a more modern take on Latin American identity and culture.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they said, I can't help but wish the conversation about what it means to be Latin American or part of its diaspora had advanced since 1967. Apparently, we've gotten bigger budgets and fancier storytelling tools, but we haven't found more to say.
That's pretty harsh.
Yeah.
Makes you think about how we approach adaptations.
Mm,
Are we looking for a faithful recreation or a modern reinterpretation?
right.
I mean, the book is over 50 years old.
It is.
The world's changed. Our views on gender, family, culture have evolved.
Totally. And the adaptation just presents it as is.
Yeah.
Doesn't engage with that.
Like, they got the surface but not the soul.
Maybe that's why it feels like something's missing.
But what about the acting?
Yeah,
Both reviewers praised that.
they did.
Do you think the actors conveyed something deeper even with those limitations?
I think that's where the adaptation partially works.
Okay.
Even if the writing is surface level,
Uh-huh.
the actors bring depth.
The reviewers loved Claudio Cattaneo as Colonel Aureliano.
Oh, yeah, he's great.
They said he captures the charisma, the turmoil,
Right.
and they liked Nicole Montenegro and Akima as Rebecca.
Oh, at different ages.
Yeah, they said they brought out her complexity.
That's the thing. Those performances show the potential was there
Yeah.
to explore those inner lives,
Right.
even if the script didn't.
Makes you think about those choices again.
It does.
What if they'd been bolder, visually,
Mm.
showed us those unspoken emotions,
Mm-hmm.
the struggle with expectations?
It could have been transformative.
We keep coming back to missed opportunities.
We do.
The visuals are amazing, the acting has moments, but it feels like it could have been more.
More.
Yeah, like it could have sparked a conversation about how we view classics today,
Right.
how we balance beauty and flaws.
Adaptations are so interesting.
They are.
They're not just recreations, they reflect what they're
What does all this mean for our listener who's thinking of watching?
made. Good question.
What should they keep in mind?
Go in with excitement, indie, a critical eye.
Okay.
Embrace the visuals, the magic,
Yeah.
but know it sticks close to the book.
Right.
So it has the good and the bad.
So it's about understanding this is just one interpretation.
It is.
It prioritizes events over modern themes.
Which might disappoint some viewers.
Yeah, especially those hoping for a more nuanced take on the social dynamics.
Yeah,
So manage expectations.
definitely.
If you want a straightforward visual retelling,
Mhm.
you'll probably be impressed.
Right.
But if you want something more analytical,
Mm-hmm.
something that updates the themes, you might want more.
It's like two conversations at once.
I like that.
One about the technical achievement,
Yeah.
and one about the choices and what they say about us in classic literature today.
It's like the adaptation saying, here you go. What do you think?
Yeah, it's not shying away from the tough stuff,
Right.
but it's not really explaining it either.
Like it's a challenge to the viewer.
It is.
How do you see these relationships, this power dynamic?
Yeah, in the story A and D in the world today.
We have to bring our own lens.
So we do.
Which brings us to that point about some characters being more symbolic.
Like Jose Arcadio Buendia and Ursula.
Yeah,
That's right out of the book.
it is.
Garcia Marquez loves using characters to represent big ideas.
But on screen,
Yeah.
people want to connect emotionally.
Right. Do those figures work in this format?
I wonder if that's why the adaptation feels like it's missing something,
Possibly.
if those core people aren't fleshed out.
It's harder to get invested.
Yeah, it's tough because you want to honor the author,
Of course.
but you're also making something new
For a different medium.
with different expectations.
And those goals can clash.
So for our listener who's curious, BT wary,
Mm-hmm.
what's the final takeaway?
Be aware of the complexities.
Okay.
Don't expect an easy watch.
Yeah.
This story demands your attention.
Right.
It wants you to grapple with those themes.
With that style.
Yeah. Approach it as a conversation
Oh, I like that.
between the book, the show, and you embrace the visuals, the magic.
Mm-hmm.
Be ready to think critically
Ask those tough questions.
about how it resonates with you now.
How the world has changed.
Since the book.
If the adaptation reflects that,
It's a lot to unpack.
this is an adaptation that'll stay with you.
It will.
Make you think about the story Andy adapting itself.
And those challenges of bringing classic works to today's audience.
And so there you have it, folks.
A deep dive indeed.
Into 100 Years of Solitude.
And its ambitious adaptation.
We talked visuals.
Storytelling.
That balance between old and new.
We hope this gave you a lot to think about as you decide whether to visit Macondo.
Happy viewing, everyone.
And remember, a good story sparks a good conversation.